Hey everyone, welcome back to our daily devotion. We're in the book of James. We're actually close to the end of the book. We find ourselves in James chapter 4. And let me just say at the top how grateful I am that Jordan came and recorded for us the first three chapters of James. I think the world of him, and he's doing great work over at Trinity Baptist Church and here in Franklin County. With that said, I want to share with you a story from years ago. In fact, I believe it was the summer that my wife and I got married. I had gone on a trip with her family, and I had a little study guide, a Chuck Swindoll study guide, that had gone through the book of Galatians. And when we got to the hotel, I was in a room by myself. We weren't married yet. And I wanted to read through the book of Galatians. Of course, we just went through it a few days ago. And lo and behold, there in the hotel was, of course, a Gideon's Bible. And there I read through the book of Galatians again, having studied it with Swindoll, and just opened my eyes again to what the book is all about. But while I was there, it's not like I was doing anything else in a hotel room by myself. I opened up to the back and just looked at their topics, right? And you can look up things like forgiveness and love and mercy and stuff like that, and it would have two or three Bible verses to go along with it. One of the topics was pride. And one of the references was James chapter 4. And I had read through James. James was my favorite book of the Bible at the time. And I couldn't think of where in James does he really deal with pride. So I went back, read James 4, and this passage has become one of my favorite in all the Bible. In fact, chapter 4 is all about pride. The first 12 verses talks about pride within our relationships. Notice what he says starting in verse 1. What causes quarrels and what causes fights among you? Well, that's a question we all need to answer, right? Because chances are, in light of the quarantine and social distancing, we're spending more time at home, you find yourself grateful to have a home and a family and food supplies and all that sort of stuff. At the same time, you're probably driving each other crazy right now, right? You find yourself spending more time with the family, more time with the kids, and more time, with people in your home. And at times that does cause an increased rate of quarrels and arguments. So James asked this question. Now, you remember, James was writing to a local church. So he's asking generally what lies at the root of this, but also specifically in the church, in the home, or you in your life. What causes quarrels and what causes fights from among you? He says, is it not this? Your passions are at war within you. It's interesting. James doesn't look on the outside of us to point the finger. I'm only this way because of my upbringing. I'm only this way because of society. I'm only this way because of social distancing. I'm only this way because of X, Y, and Z. James says, no, that search needs to begin within your own heart. The real reason you fight and you quarrel is because of your heart, because of passions within your heart that rage within you, and they come out. He says, you desire, see the passion there, and you do not have, so you murder. Now, murder obviously is an extreme, but no one wakes up and says, I think I'll commit murder today because I'm bored. No, there is something going on within the heart. Jesus describes it as, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. James is applying the same principle. Desire leads us to do things as extreme as murder and as simple as envy, jealousy, covetousness, theft, and all of those sort of things. We desire, and so we commit sin. You covet, and you cannot obtain. So you fight and you quarrel. And then he adds this: you do not have because you do not ask. Now, why would we want something but refuse to ask for it? Pride. It's the same reason why the somewhat accurate but still stereotypical argument made against men is that we refuse to ask for directions. And there's some truth to that, right? I don't want to ask for directions because then that implies I don't know what I'm doing, right? We do not have because we do not ask. So too, we do not ask of our Heavenly Father. because of our own pride. You ask, he says, so for the most part, you don't ask at all. But when you do ask, he says, and you don't receive, it's because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. You see, he's saying here that so much of our lives are driven by our desires, driven by our passions. Now we need to see that the desires aren't necessarily bad. That desire is given to us by God to point us to the one in whom all of our desires is fulfilled in. But the problem is that we take those God-given desires and we turn them and abuse them for our own glory and our own kingdom building. And it is in that context by which we fight and we claw and we devour one another. So what lies at the root of all of this stuff is nothing short of pride. Notice what he says going down to verse 6. He talks about how God gives more grace. He says, therefore it says, God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinner. Purify your hearts, you double-minded. Now, maybe you've been in a church context, or maybe you're guilty of this yourself, and you'll say things like, where he says there, resist the devil and he will flee from you. And so you may read that and think, well, what I need to do is I need to beat my chest, my spiritual chest, and I need to prove that I'm a good Christian. And so, devil, I'm going to resist you, and I'm the man, or whatever it might be. But if that's your reading of this text, you didn't read it within its context. This is one of the problems with a lot of charismania Christianity, is it puts so much onus on, I'm indwelt with the Spirit, I can overcome this, I'm a good Christian boy or girl. But James's answer is actually quite different. He speaks of grace to humility, therefore submit. Therefore submit to God. And in submitting to God, then comes the resisting of temptation, resisting of the devil. And in that context, it flees from us. In fact, he adds to it, verse 8, draw near to God. That's an act of humility. Because remember, you're not asking because you refuse to ask in your ego. And when you do ask, you ask it for your own ego. He says, no, but if you draw near to God, submit to him, he will draw near to you. And then here is at the end of verse 8, the verse that a lot of people have been quoting with tongue in cheek in light of the COVID-19 crisis. Cleanse your hands, you sinner, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Now, I think that's quite funny. And we'll add it to the list of 1,000 new memes that we've all come across online in the last however long we've been isolated. It feels like I was 17 whenever this started. But you see what he's saying is the idea that when we submit to God, when we draw near to God, there is a purifying result, right? That we purify our hearts, we cleanse our souls, because that is what God does. Whenever pride is our story, we will not be purified. So not only do we see pride within relationships, we see pride in regards to our future. And this passage is perfect considering our context. He says, come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will go in such and such a town, spend a year there and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. The chances are, a few weeks ago, you had your calendar full with stuff. I still remember that on March 12th, I was packing my bags. My family and I were going to go to West Kentucky, in Breckinridge County and Owensboro. We're going to see some good, some old friends of ours from where we served in Breck County. But also, we were there I was going to run a half marathon, first one I was ever going to run, and it got canceled. You see, I was making preparations for the next day and the day after that. But never could we have thought we'd be living the world that we're living in now. And how many of us are struggling with what does tomorrow look like? And that's kind of James's point. He says, yes, we can be wise with our schedule. And he's not against, having a planner. He says, but when we think as if I'm in control of my future, that is dangerous territory. He goes on to say, what is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time, and then it vanishes. That is sobering, isn't it? I mean, you think about it. Chances are you know your parents. You probably even know your grandparents. You may know your great-grandparents. But your great-great-grandparents lived what? 100, 120 years ago? And not only did we never meet them, but chances are you don't know their story. So within 100 years, will anyone remember us? Life is but a mist. It is here today and gone tomorrow. It really struck me that I'm about twice the age of our graduating high schoolers at the church. I'm 35, and I'm about twice their age. And the first 18 years went a lot slower than the second 17 years. Life is but a mist. And I anticipate the next 18, next 17, next 20, whatever, will go even faster. Your life is but a mist. And for you are a mist that appears for a little time and vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. You see the pride regarding our future. The sobering reality and the comfort we should have is that God is in absolute control. He's in absolute control. Whether or not we live in a safe, secure nation with a booming economy, or if we live in a world of social distancing where we're afraid to leave our house. Draw near to God at this time, and He will draw near to you. And don't worry about tomorrow. God already has it taken care of.